You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of this shit. Money swollen like sis. They done perfected the kid. Got a billion who sank on my head. Nothing better. Pull out the rope I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 15th part of What If Deku Meets Powerpuff Girls. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of ChiWriters on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. The Utonium family car rolled smoothly through the waking streets of Townsville, the golden morning light spilling across rooftops and storefronts. Everything looked calm. Quiet. Almost too quiet. In the front passenger seat, Blossom sat up straight with her seatbelt neatly in place. She was alert, listening carefully as the professor spoke. So then I told them, if you want an efficient energy loop that doesn't overload your primary capacitor, you have to reconfigure the stabilizer sequence. Simple modular design, really, but, well, the intern nearly passed out when I explained it. The professor chuckled, hands steady on the wheel. Blossom smiled. That sounds like an exciting project, Professor. Oh, it is. It's for the new clean energy sector at Townsville Tech Labs. They're calling it Project Helios. He sounded proud, tired, maybe, but proud. Finally, some funding for innovation instead of just containment. And mechanical integration, too. I get to build things again. That's great, Blossom replied earnestly, her eyes shining. Maybe one day, we can see your work. Bubbles was in the back, humming softly and doodling in a pastel-pink notebook balanced on her knees. She was drawing bunnies riding bicycles, each one with little helmets. Occasionally, she paused to flip to her next work. Buttercup was slouched against the door across from Bubbles, head leaned on her fist, as she stared out the window in dead silence, watching Townsville pass by like a slideshow she'd seen too many times. Lawns were trimmed. Stores were opening. People were waving, smiling, living their boring lives. It was too peaceful. Too still. Her fingers drummed restlessly against her thigh. A flicker of heat pulsed in her chest, a familiar itch for motion, for noise, for something to fight. She imagined spotting a monster in the distance, or hearing sirens wail. Something real. Something exciting. Something that would remind her she still mattered. But she knew the rules. Even if a villain did show up, she'd just have to sit still. Watch from the window. Pretend to be normal, and let the professor handle it. Because of the rule. Because of him. Stupid no powers rule, Buttercup muttered under her breath. Outside the car, the school building came into view. Townsville Elementary stood tall with cheerful red bricks and a brightly painted sign that read, "Welcome back students." Though the balloons from the first week were long gone, the banner still hung above the main entrance, faded but clinging on. Teachers were already outside, calling out reminders. The playground buzzed with energy from kids unloading off buses. To Buttercup, it still looked like her ongoing hell. The car pulled to a slow stop in the drop-off lane. The professor put the car in park and glanced at them through the rearview mirror. "All right, backpacks ready. Got your lunches, girls? Everything packed?" He got his confirmation nods. "Good. I'll be picking you up same time, and throughout this week again. I don't want you riding the bus for now." "Seriously? Again?" Buttercup groaned. "What's gonna happen on a bus, Professor? Someone bumps my elbow and I vaporize the roof." The professor's voice remained even. "I just want to avoid situations. I trust you. But I'd rather not take risks, all right?" Buttercup looked away. "You don't trust me. Just say it." That's not true, he said, a little too quickly. It's not about trust. It's about keeping things stable. Routine helps. For all of us. Routine sucks, Buttercup muttered. He hesitated. Remember, no powers. Just focus on school. His eyes flicked briefly to Buttercup, then back to the road. Blossom unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the door. Thanks for the ride. We'll see you after. Bubbles followed with a bright smile. Bye-bye, Professor. Buttercup opened her door last. Stepped out slow. Slammed the door just hard enough to make a point. The car pulled away. Blossom glanced over at her. Come on, Buttercup. It's just school. Can we try not to make a scene today? Yeah, you enjoy it, nerd, Buttercup rolled her eyes. I'll be the one trying not to punch anyone who keeps looking at me funny. Swinging her fist for emphasis. They don't stare that much, Bubbles offered, though her voice was quiet. Get some glasses then, Buttercup said flatly. They stare and whisper too. Like as if I can't hear them. Well, Bubbles paused, then added softly, at least some of our friends from Pokey Oaks are still with us. That's great, right? That earned a short pause. Buttercup didn't look at her, but her tone kept the edge. Yeah, great, the three walked through the school gates, settling into the familiar rhythm of another school day, same hallways, same classes, same stairs. Townsville Elementary. Said school sat just a few blocks from the heart of the city, its red brick walls warmed by the morning sun. It was a large, welcoming structure, bigger than their old preschool, with wide windows, a green field out back, and a bell that chimed a little too cheerfully at the start of each day. On the outside, it looked like a classic school straight out of a picture book. Inside, things were a little less perfect. Ever since the girls had graduated from Pokey Oaks kindergarten and started here at age 6, life had been different. The transition hadn't been easy, not even for them. Saying goodbye to their old classroom, old nap blankets, and simpler days was bittersweet. Not that Buttercup would admit it, of course. Blossom had cried. Bubbles gave out goodbye drawings. Buttercup? She just kicked the sandbox one last time and muttered that she was so over it. Still, Townsville Elementary hadn't been all bad. There were more subjects to study, more rules to follow, and more kids to meet. For a while, the girls settled in, strange but celebrated, known by classmates as the pint-sized protectors of Townsville. They floated through first and second grade with decent grades and decent smiles. But by third grade, something's changed. Literally. After the incident, that strange, still hushed accident in the lab, the girls looked different to the kids, and without further explanation from the professor, other than it was complicated, well, soon the whispers and rumors started. You'd think that saving the city from giant monsters and evil robots, countless times, would earn them some kind of respect. But kids, well, kids are kids. And kids can be cruel. The gossip came quietly, at first. Snickers during lunch. Side eyes in the hallway. Not everyone said things outright, but Buttercup didn't need to hear them to know. She could feel the stares. The fake smiles. The shifting glances when she passed. And it wasn't just the new students either. Even some of their old classmates, the ones who'd played tag with them in kindergarten, now acted like the girls were something weird, something to whisper about. Buttercup noticed. She always noticed. But instead of speaking up, she let the frustration simmer. She buried it deep, under sharp words and long silences. Because right now, it wasn't the supervillains or monsters that were getting to her. It was the ordinary ones. The ones with backpacks and juice boxes. The ones who looked at her like she didn't belong. Making it to their shared classroom, it was the typical setup one would find in a public elementary school: rows of wooden desks scuffed with pencil graffiti, laminated posters clinging to the pale green walls with curling edges. Multiplication tables. Fractions as pizza slices. A bright motivational banner hung lopsidedly above the whiteboard, "Math is power," as if yelling it made it true. The air was tinged with pencil shavings, dry erase marker, and a faint, stubborn scent of cafeteria chicken nuggets from lunch 2 hours ago. The clock ticked too slowly for most students' liking. Mr. Williams paced at the front, marker in hand. A man in his late 30s, he had a mop of chestnut brown hair that always looked slightly damp, like he came straight out of a rushed morning shower and didn't bother to towel dry. He had a mustache that never fully committed to existing. His wire-rimmed glasses teetered constantly at the edge of his nose. He wore shirt and tie combos that clashed on principle and carried the awkward energy of someone who really wanted kids to like math. He taught general studies but always gave extra focus to math and logic puzzles, his personal favorites. He even had a special problem of the week board in the corner, where high achievers like Blossom often saw their names written in dry erase marker. Despite his best efforts, his jokes landed more often with groans than giggles. Still, he tried. Always with that tired but determined smile. He scribbled a basic equation on the board, long division. "All right. Who can solve this for me?" Hands went up across the room. Blossom's was first, as always, followed immediately by Bubbles, who beamed with hopeful energy. Buttercup didn't move. She leaned into one palm, her elbow propped lazily on the desk, staring at the corner of her notebook. Not taking notes, doodling. Some kind of sharp, abstract pattern in heavy pencil lines. Let's give someone new a try. Mr. Williams' eyes scanned the class and landed on her. Buttercup? His voice turned falsely cheery. Do you have the answer to the problem on the board? She didn't look up. Didn't raise my hand, sir. She answered, voice strppd of any enthusiasm. Like there ever was. A pause. The class was quiet but not uncomfortable, used to this rhythm. Right, Mr. Williams sighed, like always, not quite hiding his frustration. He turned back toward the board, muttering something under his breath. Quiet enough for plausible deniability, but certain individual could have. Buttercup heard it, she always did. Still not looking up, she pressed her pencil a little harder. Her scribbles grew darker. Great. Here it comes. The teacher tried again. All right, then, Mr. Williams said, brightening again. Blossom, how about you? Yes, sir. Blossom straightened in her seat. She studied the board just long enough to make it look like she was thinking, then rattled off the steps with ease. You divide 432 by 12, 12 goes into 43 3 times, that's 36, subtract that and bring down the 2, then 12 into 72 is 6. So, 36. Clean, concise, and correct. Excellent, Blossom. Very good. As always. The praised, feeling the spark of why he went into teaching. His smile lingered. Then flicked sideways toward Buttercup. That smile dimmed a little, still kind, but tinged with a familiar blend of concern and disappointment. Maybe you should learn something from your sister, Buttercup. He pointed out, before giving another one of his plastered encouraging smiles, confidence can take you far. Oh, great. Here we go again. Buttercup's pencil paused. Just for a second, then she rolled her eyes. Yeah, sure, she muttered, just loud enough for her desk to hear. Not like I haven't heard that 100 times. She returned to her notebook. Darker lines now. Her pencil's edge scratched harder into the paper. Honestly, school had become the second worst part of her life lately, right after the whole "no powers" thing. At least in Pokey Oaks, she remembered how Mrs. Keene actually treated the girls with more or less the same manner. Here. The comparisons were constant, blaringly obvious, and really suffocating. If she wasn't compared to Blossom's grades, it was Bubbles' cheerful nature. If it wasn't their manners, it was their behavior. And Buttercup hated it. Hated the way the teachers looked at her like she was a puzzle missing a few pieces, or worse, a broken copy of something better. But she didn't care. Not anymore. Fighting meant showing she cared. So instead, she ignored the teachers when they talked like that. Let them talk. Let them think what they wanted. She stayed in her own head, focused on her own pace, her own space. The place where she wasn't Blossom's shadow or Bubbles' opposite, just Buttercup. That was enough. Or at least, she tried to believe it was. As the school days went by, coming to the end of the week, school had become what it always became for Buttercup, just school. A place to show up, do the bare minimum, and keep her head down. She did her best to not ruffle too many feathers. Wasn't here to prove anything. The less attention she drew, the better, especially from the teachers who couldn't help comparing her to Blossom and Bubbles. Buttercup had already been scolded about what had happened on Sunday, with her use of the simulation room. And with everything else going on lately, the last thing she needed was another quiet talk in the lab about behavior, control, or the fact that she'd scowled her way through math again. So instead, she did as she always did, floated through the days. Not quite invisible, but not involved either. If Blossom raised her hand 5 times in a lesson, Buttercup made sure hers stayed planted on her desk. If Bubbles got called up to share a poem, Buttercup slouched lower in her seat. She wasn't stupid. Far from it. She just didn't see the point of shining in a place where this type of spotlight never was really her thing. Still, she had her moments in school. Recess, for one, was her favorite class, whether no one else considered it that. If there was one thing Buttercup genuinely looked forward to at Townsville Elementary, it was that 25-minute pocket of freedom carved into the day. No worksheets. No whispers. No weird stares. Just the sun, the sky, the pavement, and time to let out some energy. She didn't always play with the other kids, not anymore, but she liked watching them run wild. Dodgeball. Tetherball. Tag. There was something honest, freeing, about the noise of it all. Something real. Sometimes she'd kick around a ball by herself or do chin-ups on the low monkey bars. Other times, she'd just lie back on the grass with her arms behind her head, half listening to the chaos and tuning out the world. The schoolyard at Townsville Elementary was a definite step up from the fenced-in rectangle of pokey oaks. Spread across the back of the school building, it offered more space, more green, more places to disappear into. The grass, where it grew, was wild and patchy, alternating between vibrant green tufts and dry brown patches that refused to come back no matter how much it rained. A few wildflowers sprouted near the perimeter fence, and beyond that were some squat hedges no taller than the kids themselves. In one corner, the playground buzzed with activity, bright red and yellow slides, monkey bars worn smooth from use, a seesaw that creaked on one end, and a climbing wall low enough to be safe but just high enough to thrill. Kids laughed and shouted, sneakers stomping over mulch, and static-charged hair flared up after every slide descent. Closer to the building, the picnic tables were taken over by groups eating snacks or sharing drawings, while others congregated near the tetherball pole or hopscotch squares chalked faintly into the concrete. And then, there was the blacktop. The basketball court stood a bit apart from everything else, not isolated, but removed enough that most kids didn't bother going unless they were serious about playing. Buttercup liked it that way. She stood alone at the far end of the court, the chain-link fence casting soft shadows over the pavement. A hoop loomed overhead, rusted around the rim but still sturdy, net frayed but intact. A slightly deflated basketball bounced beneath her hand with a steady rhythm. Buttercup wore brown khakis that ended just above her scuffed black and white sneakers. Her white and green t-shirt, slightly oversized, fluttered as she moved in her black boots, quick footwork, a pivot, a bounce, then a leap. Not a full jump, not obvious. Just a little lift, a little hover that wouldn't draw attention from a distant teacher's glance. Swish. The ball arced cleanly into the net. She caught it on the rebound, grinning as it landed in her hands. Yes, she whispered to herself, pumping a fist. Still got it. Another bounce. Another shot. Another soft swish of nylon. All the while she flew back and forth to gather the ball. It wasn't really flying. Not the kind she was used to. But it was something. Just enough air to make her feel like herself again. And out here, no math problems, no lectures, no one comparing her to her sisters. No one watching. Just her and the court. Just enough distance from the others to make it feel like peace. Her and her sisters would at times play together, but ultimately get on with their own likes. Across the yard, near the flower beds by the art benches, Bubbles giggled with a couple girls from class. They sat cross-legged, sharing gel pens and coloring books, passing drawings back and forth. Every now and then, one of them would lean into Bubbles' shoulder like she was the sunniest person they'd ever met. Further off, Blossom sat under one of the big shade trees with her little journal, propped open on her lap, her back straight and posture perfect. Lately, she has also taken to isolating herself at recess, not a lot, but enough for Buttercup to notice. She initially chalked it up to her using recess as a mental recharge or whatever nerdy term she'd picked up. Buttercup didn't find it strange, but decided to let Red be. Whatever, Buttercup thought as she bounced the ball again. Everyone's got their thing. She kept reminding herself. Bounce. Bounce. Step. Leap, just a tiny one, and shoot. Another clean basket. She let out a low, satisfied laugh, wiped it before floating towards the ball that bounced away, when a shadow cut across the pavement. Hey, Buttersquirt, a male voice came out. What's up? Playing basketball by yourself? Her stomach twisted. She knew that voice. Knew it too well. Mitch Middleton stood a few feet away, grinning like the annoying little punk he'd always been. He'd grown a bit since Pokey Oaks, lankier now, but somehow his face looked dumber with that one missing front tooth. He wore ragged jeans and a black t-shirt with a skull printed on the front, faded and cracked, like him. And, of course, his two dumb sidekicks, Lloyd and Floyd, those twins that followed him around, were right there too, snickering like trained parrots. Just playing, Buttercup crossed her arms, her tone flat. Mitch. Can I have my ball back? Mitch bounced it lazily in his hands, pretending to think. Really? Playing all by yourself? What, the tough Buttercup doesn't have any friends now. The twins laughed like it was the funniest joke ever. Yeah. Lloyd said. So lonely, Buttercup. Floyd added. I just want my ball, Mitch. Buttercup sighed through her nose, trying not to let it get to her. I don't want any trouble. And you don't want it either. But Mitch just leaned in, his smirk getting wider. Oh, I get it. I really do. You're out here practicing, trying to feel special again. Too bad you're not the cool kid anymore. No powers, no glory, huh? Her jaw tightened. What are you talking about? Mitch faked a gasp, clutching his chest like a bad actor in a school play. Oh, come on, Buttercup. Don't play dumb. We all noticed. He rolled his eyes for extra effect, snorting through his crooked grin. Like, we saw on the news about that wicked big fight a few months back, and then you three vanish. Then you show up again, acting like everything's fine, but, he wagged a finger vaguely at her, scanning her up and down like she was on display. Fingers, dude. You got fingers now. Also ears, a nose and not doll-like body, pointing out, giving her a look that Buttercup instantly knew. You think we didn't notice that? You're not fooling anyone. You're just normal now. Buttercup's fists slid behind her back, digging into each other so hard her knuckles turned white. She could feel the heat rising, crawling up her neck. You don't know what you're talking about. Her voice came out flat, but her teeth were clenched like a vice. Mitch chuckled, smug and slow, like he was enjoying every second of this. Yeah. Looks like I hit a nerve, boys. He leaned in just a little, his smirk widening into that dumb crooked smile. Face it, Buttercup. Without your powers, you're just a grumpy little kid no one likes. Even your sisters are better at pretending to be normal than you are. The twins, those brainless copycats, echoed him on cue, pointing with stupid grins. Yeah. Not so tough now. Her eyes snapped shut. And there it was, that pressure behind her temples, building. The voice was softer this time. A whisper, but it wrapped around her thoughts like a snake. Don't let that punk get away with it. It slid into her ears, sharp but calm. You know what to do. Show him you're not weak. You know how. Mitch cocked his head, watching her tense up. He squinted, confused, glancing at his lackeys. You okay, Buttercup? What, you gonna cry on me now? He gave a mocking pout, shoving the basketball under his arm. Ah, poor baby Buttercup. I didn't know you were suddenly so sensitive. His smirk twisted. It's okay, little baby, you don't have to cry, her eyes snapped open. Green and glowing. Mitch didn't even finish his sentence, when Buttercup's fist rocketed out, a blur of motion, slamming squarely into Mitch's nose with a sickening, meaty crack. His feet left the ground, he didn't stumble, he was launched. A raw, strangled yelp tore out of his throat as his body ragdolled through the air. Gah! He hit the pavement once. Then twice. Then he tumbled like a sack of bricks, finally skidding to a violent stop near the seesaws, curled into himself with his hands clutching his face. His cries were sharp and raw now, higher pitched, wet with snot and BLD, as red streaks began dripping through his fingers. Dead silence. Every head in the yard turned. The twins stood frozen in place, mouths gaping, their faces pale. Slowly, very slowly, their eyes crawled toward Buttercup. She stood rooted to the blacktop, fists still raised, chest heaving, her scowl cutting so deep it could have split the school in half. One of the twins let out a whimper. Why, you're nuts. The other pointed with a trembling finger. She's crazy. They didn't wait for a response. Their sneakers squeaked as they turned tail and sprinted off, tripping over each other in their scramble to escape. Then whispers came next, rippling through the yard like a wave. Did you see that? A boy near the tetherball pole whispered, his eyes round like dinner plates. She punched him. Like, for real, another kid hissed, ducking behind a picnic table but peeking over the edge. I thought they didn't have powers anymore, a girl murmured, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. Whoa, someone else muttered, the kind of whoa that wasn't admiration, more like they'd just seen a car crash. Buttercup didn't say a word. She stood there, fists trembling, heart pounding like a war drum inside her chest. She could feel every stare drilling into her skin. She wanted to explain. Wanted to tell them Mitch had it coming. That he deserved every bit of it. But their faces said it all. Blossom and Bubbles broke through the crowd. Blossom's steps were quick, controlled, but her face was tight, jaw clenched, clutching her school planner like it was a lifeline. Her eyes darted from Mitch, crumpled on the ground, to Buttercup. Bubbles looked like she might burst into tears, her hands half raised as if she wanted to reach out but didn't know how. Buttercup's gut twisted. They'll never understand you. Then her inner voice came out. You don't need them. You're more. You're stronger. You don't need to. Miss Utonium. Suddenly brought out of her thoughts, only to see the principal, Ms. Donovan, her voice cracking through the noise like a WHP. She was storming across the yard now, eyes sharp, face red with fury. Her heels clacked with each determined step. What is I heard about you beating up one of your classmates, she barked, staring at Mitch on the ground, then back to Buttercup. You're coming with me, right now. You're in big trouble, little girl. Buttercup's legs felt locked. Heavy. She couldn't go to the office. She couldn't sit there while they lectured her, judged her, made her apologize. Not when everything inside was boiling over. You don't need this. The voice was close now, urgent. Why let them drag you down? You're better than them. Always have been. Buttercup. Ms. Donovan snapped again, only a few steps away. Don't make this worse than it already is. Buttercup's fists unclenched. Her fingers twitched. Then she shot upwards, launching off the blacktop like a slingshot. A blast of air knocked back the nearest kids, shrieks filling the yard as she zipped low over their heads. Ms. Donovan's words were lost in the rush of wind. Buttercup, wait. Bubbles' voice echoed faintly behind her, strained and tight. But Buttercup didn't look back. The shouts, the whispers, the stares, they all melted into the wind as she shot away from Townsville Elementary, fists clenched, jaw locked, flying as fast as her body would carry her. The school shrank beneath her, the playground just a smear of color now, but the knot in her chest stayed tight. Too tight. Like she couldn't breathe right. See? You're free now. The voice was silk in her ears, calm and coaxing. They're beneath you. You don't need their approval. You never did. I'm in so much trouble, she muttered under her breath, her voice shaky, teeth gritted. What did I do? What the heck did I just do? I'm such an idiot. The words felt hollow, useless against the buzzing storm inside her. Mitch's stupid, smug grin was still burned into her mind. The crunch of his nose. The way the other kids had stared, not with fear or respect, but like she was a freak. Like she was just another bully. And now the voice was gone. No more whispers, no more tempting smirks in her ear. Just silence. And that was worse. Stupid, stupid, she hissed, curling her fists tighter, her nails biting into her palms. Her whole body trembled. She could feel it, that boiling heat beneath her skin, pushing up, 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 until it had nowhere left to go. Her arms started to crackle, jagged sparks of green electricity dancing along her skin. The energy wasn't contained to her fists this time. It flared outward, wrapping around her like a storm, flickering wildly with every ragged breath. The world blurred. Her vision tinted green. Why won't it stop, she growled, the words tearing out of her throat as she shot higher into the sky. And then. Boom. A thunderous crash rattled through the clouds. Buttercup flinched mid-air, her head snapping toward the sound. In the distance, plumes of smoke twisted up from the city, curling like black scars against the blue. Sirens wailed faintly beneath it all, thin and panicked. Down below, chaos erupted, a monstrous shriek, as a hulking beast smashed its way through Townsville. It was huge, its shape a twisted mess of jagged stone and rusted steel. Heavy, bulky legs slammed into the pavement, each step cracking the ground. Its arms were massive, ending in brutal pincers that crushed cars like tin cans. Sparks and embers spewed from its crooked iron teeth as it howled again, swiping through traffic with ease. Buttercup hovered high above, fists trembling, her body lit in furious green. Her breath steadied, slow and deliberate. Her lips curled into a grin, sharp, dangerous, alive. And that's when the voice returned, purring in her ear. You know what to do. Don't let them see you as weak. Fight. The storm inside her ignited. Her aura flared outward in a blazing surge, crackling as the air itself seemed to shudder around her. The storm wasn't just on her skin now, it was her. Every emotion, every ounce of anger and frustration churned together, blending into a pure, pulsing energy that wrapped her in a fierce glow, lighting her up like a green star against the sky. Her fists clenched tighter, her muscles coiling, the power snapping around her like a WHP. A sharp grin carved its way across her face, dangerous and alive. This'll do, she muttered, her voice low and biting. Then, with a final, explosive burst, Buttercup rocketed forward, slicing through the air like a bullet, fists first, heart pounding, needing to hit anything until it finally stopped hurting. "Alright, who else wants some?" Buttercup barked, hovering mid-air, fists clenched and crackling with residual green energy. Below her, the city was a wreck. The fight was over. But the damage was done. Buttercup hovered mid-air, green energy still crackling faintly around her fists as she stared down at the wreckage below. Townsville, or at least a good chunk of it, now looked like the losing side of a war zone. Buildings lay gutted and hollow, their steel frames twisted like skeletons. Glass blanketed the streets in shimmering piles. The roads were cracked open, huge jagged scars running through the city blocks, smoke curling lazily into the dusky sky. The sun was setting, casting everything in a burnt orange glow that only made the destruction look worse. Sirens echoed faintly through the ruins, far off and getting fainter. The emergency crews had been evacuating people the moment the monster showed up. Buttercup knew that. She knew the streets were clear. But still, looking at the mess, she could already hear the lectures coming. And lying at the center of the chaos was the monster. Or what was left of it. It wasn't moving anymore. Its massive, armored body was caved in at the chest where she'd hit it last, crushed into the crater beneath. Sparks fizzled out from between its shattered plates of stone and steel, green scorch marks peppered its limbs, and one of its clawed arms had been blown clean off, still embedded in a nearby building wall. The rest of it twitched weakly, as if still trying to process the beating it just took. Buttercup crossed her arms and let out a breath. Yeah, didn't think so. She drifted down, boots crunching onto a stretch of cracked pavement. The ground gave a tired groan beneath her, chunks of concrete shifting under her weight. She rolled her shoulder, flexing the stiffness from her right arm. Not a bad workout, she muttered, smirking to herself, though it faded when the ground rumbled beneath her again. Thud. She froze. Another monster? No, the rhythm was too slow, too deliberate. Thud. Thud. Oh, no crud, she sighed. Through the smoke, the familiar silhouette of the dynamo emerged, stomping forward with all its ridiculous, oversized glory. Every step sent another shudder through the streets. The battle-mech's steel skin gleamed under the setting sun, its expression etched into that oversized Powerpuff face, locked into a grim frown that, if Buttercup didn't know better, was exactly the same face the professor was making right now. And sure enough, the loudspeaker buzzed to life. "Buttercup," boomed the professor's voice, sharp and furious. Buttercup winced, plastering on a grin. "Professor. Hey. You made it. Took you long enough." The dynamo's head tilted down, servo joints whining. With a hiss, the cockpit cracked open, revealing Professor Utonium gripping the control levers like his life depended on it. His face red, and his hair was in full disheveled parent mode. "Buttercup Utonium. What do you think you're doing?" Buttercup floated up, hands raised innocently. Saving the city? You're welcome." The professor's forehead vein looked ready to pop. "Saving? You've leveled an entire business district. Look around you, young lady. This is not what staying out of trouble looks like." Buttercup's grin didn't falter. Instead, she zipped into the crater, grabbed what was left of the monster's tail, and with a casual swing, hurled it high into the air. The beast flew in a perfect arc toward Monster Island, disappearing in the far distance with a faint crash. She dusted off her hands. "There. Fixed it." The professor stared, deadpan. "Go home. Now." "Villian," Buttercup groaned, launching herself into the sky in a streak of green light. "You're so dramatic," she muttered as the city shrank beneath her. Utonium residence. The sun had dipped lower by the time Buttercup reached the Utonium residence. The house sat quietly, deceptively peaceful, its modern cubic design glowing soft under the evening light. Buttercup hovered by the open window to her room, peering in like a burglar about to be caught. She floated inside, landing with a soft thud, but there was no time to pretend like she could sneak past this. Just at that moment, Blossom's voice was already calling from downstairs. Buttercup. Get down here. Now. Yep. Definitely in trouble, Buttercup groaned as she drifted lazily out of her room. Okay, I'm coming. In the living room, her sister's back from school, and certain individual was not happy. Blossom stood waiting with her arms crossed, her expression sharp enough to cut glass. Bubbles sat quietly on the couch, nervously petting Bullet the squirrel, eyes darting between her sisters. What? Buttercup shrugged, leaning against the doorway like she had all the time in the world. What? Blossom's voice shot up an octave. What happened at the playground, Buttercup? What was that? And then you go off and fight a monster after we've been told 100 times to stay out of this. What were you thinking? I was thinking that Mitch deserved that punch I gave him, for being AFJRK, she said with a smile. Before going on, I was also thinking someone had to do something. Red, Buttercup snapped back. Sorry if it wasn't up to your paperwork standards. Do you understand how embarrassing it was for Bubbles and I to be put in that situation, because of you? Blossom's eyes narrowed. This isn't a game, Buttercup. You're reckless, you're impulsive, and you're making everything worse. Buttercup floated over to the kitchen, muttering, yeah, ignoring her sister. Blossom stood frozen, stunned for a moment, until her fists clenched, and her body shivered with barely contained frustration. A faint pink glow flickered around her. Bubbles, watching from the couch, gasped softly as the pink aura wrapped around Blossom's figure, pulsing with each sharp breath. Buttercup reached the fridge, yanking open the door, looking for a snack before. Thud. The appliance slammed shut, nearly taking Buttercup's fingers with it. What the hell? She snapped, turning around to see not just the fridge, but the toaster, the kettle, even a few cabinet doors, trembling and glowing with a shimmering pink outline. A few magnets fluttered loose, clattering to the floor like falling dominoes. Then came the footsteps. Blossom stepped into the kitchen, her usual composure nowhere to be found. Her face was flushed with anger, pink eyes glowing faintly, and her hair seemed to sway with the air's static. The objects around her rattled, caught in her rising aura, coasters teetered, a pencil rolled across the counter, and a stray mug inched dangerously close to the edge. Buttercup turned around, and raised an eyebrow, smirking. Wow! Look who's suddenly a hypocrite. She leaned against the counter casually. Guess someone's getting real comfy with their new powers, huh? Do you ever take anything seriously? Blossom hissed, stepping closer, the pink sparks dancing at her fingertips now. The tension in the air crackled, thick enough to taste. Buttercup didn't budge. Only the stuff that matters. Blossom's glare sharpened. What you did today was reckless. It was chaotic, selfish, and completely irresponsible. Buttercup shot back, oh, of course you would say that, Miss Perfect, arms crossed, tone dripping with mockery. Everything you do is always so harmonious. She spat the word like poison, her anger flaring. Always Miss Perfect, so much the F teachers won't shut up about you. That seemed to strike a nerve. And a sudden shockwave of green energy shot out at the nearest victim, the toaster. It jolted violently off the counter, slamming into the wall with a loud metallic clang, black smoke immediately sputtering from its vents. Bubbles flinched, eyes wide. Guys! Please, she cried, zipping between them, her eyes glowing a soft but urgent blue. Her hands were up, palms outward, though her voice trembled. You're scaring me. Can we not do this? Please. The Blossom froze for a heartbeat, the lingering crackle of her powers buzzing in the silence. Bubbles' voice, soft but desperate, seemed to anchor her. But not Buttercup. Oh, here comes everyone's sweet little Bubbles, she sneered, come to tell us of all the nice compliments the teachers gave you. Blossom snapped back, what does that have to do with anything? Frustration and confusion painting her face. Oh, of course you wouldn't notice, Miss Leader, if I could even call you that, Buttercup sneered, floating closer, eyes narrowing to slits, as her power intensified. Enough, both of you. Bubbles' voice cracked louder than before, her blue glow flashing as she flung herself between them. Her expression was a mixture of fear and frustration, cheeks flushed, eyes glassy. She looked at them, looked through them with a pleading gaze that made both girls pause, if only for a breath. And then, the house trembled. That familiar, rhythmic rumble. Professor's home, Bubbles said quietly, almost to herself. That sentence alone seemed to cut the power. Both pink and green glows finally faded, the tension simmering into an uneasy silence. As if those words alone flipped a mental breaker. Buttercup huffed, crossing her arms. Great. I'm in trouble now. The front door slammed open with a sharp, deliberate thud. Heavy footsteps echoed through the house, each step punctuated with rising frustration. Buttercup. Professor Utonium's voice reverberated like a gavel through the walls. Bubbles darted toward the hallway, eager to intercept. Welcome home, Professor, she called, voice chipper but laced with nervous energy. The professor, scowl firmly planted on his face, paused for a moment upon seeing Bubbles. His eyes softened, if only slightly. Ah, Bubbles, thank you. I'm glad you and Blossom came back home safe. I'm sorry I couldn't come and get you myself. Bubbles smiled faintly, nodding, though inside she knew the reason why. Buttercup. It's fine, Professor, she said softly, but her eyes flickered back toward the kitchen, anxiety creeping back in. Blossom emerged next, arms still crossed, posture tense but respectful. Welcome back, Professor. The professor's brow furrowed. He could read Blossom's expression like an open book. He sighed through his nose, then turned his gaze down the hall. I see. His voice dropped into that firm, no-nonsense tone that left no room for argument. Buttercup. Get in here. Now. A few seconds passed. Finally, Buttercup floated out of the kitchen, hovering low, her usual scowl softened into something more reluctant. But she didn't dare look at him. She landed quietly in the living room, shoulders stiff, head lowered just enough to avoid direct eye contact. The room went silent, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Girls, the professor said, voice softer now, but heavy with parental authority, if you don't mind, go to your rooms. I need to talk to Buttercup. Blossom didn't argue. Bubbles lingered a little longer, worried eyes flickering between them, but eventually followed her sister's lead. The professor turned to Buttercup, gesturing toward the couch. Buttercup. Sit. Down. Now. Buttercup didn't respond. She hovered up slightly, ready to fly to. No flying, the professor said sharply. Walk. Buttercup froze mid-air, glaring at him, fists clenched. The professor didn't flinch, his gaze steady, locked onto hers. A silent standoff. Fine, Buttercup muttered, dropping to the floor with a solid thump. She stalked off toward the couch, shoulders tense, fists stuffed in her pockets. The professor watched her go, arms crossed tightly as he exhaled through his nose. Upstairs, Blossom and Bubbles exchanged uneasy glances before walking away. The silence was suffocating. Buttercup slumped into the couch, arms crossed, scowl fixed in place. She looked anywhere but at the professor at the coffee table, at the carpet, even at a crooked painting on the wall. The professor, meanwhile, sat across from her, elbows on his knees, fingers steepled as he studied her in heavy, expectant silence. It was a standoff. One neither was willing to break. Finally, the professor sighed, rubbing his forehead. His voice came out tired, strained. Do you have something to explain to me, Buttercup, about today? Buttercup's eyes narrowed, but her lips twitched into a crooked smirk. I feel like this is a trick question. The sarcasm was her armor, but she finally looked at him. The professor's lips thinned. His fist slammed against the coffee table with a resounding thud. The sharp noise echoed through the room, making Buttercup flinch just a little. Of course it's rhetorical, Buttercup, the professor snapped, his voice rising. Do you know how embarrassing it is to be called out of work to find out that one of my daughters punched a fellow student in front of the entire playground and then ran off? Buttercup's scowl deepened, her glare hardening. That wasn't an innocent student. That was Mitch Mitchelson. You know him, Professor. He deserved that punch. I just wish I did it somewhere more private. She didn't regret the hit, only that it caused more chaos than she wanted. That's not the point, the professor shot back. Even if that boy did deserve it, you don't handle it by decking him in front of everyone. You report it to a teacher, tell an adult, and let them handle it. Buttercup scoffed, slouching further into the couch. Yeah, sure, let me tell one of my favorite adults at school. Oh wait, I did remember how well that turned out. Her tone was venom-laced, eyes cutting. Don't be sarcastic with me, Buttercup, the professor warned, sitting up straighter. This is serious. Do you have any idea how long I had to sit in that office, talking to the principal and Mitch's parents about your behavior today? Do you understand what you're doing to your future? Oh, so now it's about my future. Buttercup spat, sitting forward. Funny, because when I was punching monsters 7 months ago, saving this city, that was all fine and dandy. But now? Now it's suddenly a problem. The professor pinched the bridge of his nose, frustration mounting. That was different, and you know it. You're at school now. You're not supposed to be fighting your peers. Especially not in a place where. Buttercup let out a sharp laugh, cutting him off. Peers? Really, Professor? You just said it. We're not like them. We're not like anyone else in that school, so stop pretending we're just normal kids. The professor's expression hardened. You know what I mean. No, Professor. I don't know what you mean. Buttercup pushed herself up, fists clenched at her sides. I don't get it. Why are you holding us back? Why are you so afraid of us doing what we're meant to do? We've been over this, the professor said, voice taut. Your powers are unstable. We agreed I would handle the large threats with the dynamo while you girls focus on school, on staying safe. I am safe. Buttercup shouted. I was out there today kicking monster butt. By myself. If you're so worried about Blossom and Bubbles, fine, say it. I'll handle the big stuff myself. Enough, Buttercup. The professor's voice cracked like a WHP. He stood abruptly, looming over her. I am worried about all of you. That's why we had an agreement. That's why we monitor your powers, why I handle the heavy threats. Buttercup's eyes narrowed, her tone dripping with defiance. Well, my powers seem just fine to me. Maybe it's the others who needs monitoring. The professor's face darkened. You think this is a joke? Really? Was demolishing half of Townsville today funny to you too? You caused millions in property damage, Buttercup. That wasn't control. That was recklessness. You're not ready. I am in control. Buttercup snapped back. I just needed to blow off steam. The professor raised an eyebrow, stepping forward. In total control, huh? Is that what you call flattening half a simulation room? Or turning a monster fight into a demolition derby? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're blowing off steam at the city's expense. I was angry. Buttercup shouted. I was stressed. I needed to hit something, okay? I needed to release some of the energy. And you sure did, the professor muttered bitterly. You blew off a lot of energy beams. And fire. And concrete. Good thing the mayor has funds for repairs. He crossed his arms. Maybe you should learn some control. Take a page out of your sister's book. Oh, Blossom and Bubbles, Buttercup sneered, her voice cracking. Always Blossom and Bubbles. Every time, it's the same DMN thing. At school, at home Blossom this, Bubbles that. Do you know how sick I am of hearing their names next to mine in comparison? I am not them. The professor's face was unreadable as he said, of course you're not. At least they'd be mindful of what they're doing. The words landed like a slap, so much so that it had Buttercup recoil, stung into silence. Her fists unclenched, but her face crumbled, lips trembling as she looked away, biting the inside of her cheek to hold back something. The professor didn't even seem to notice the effect his words had, rubbing his forehead as if trying to rub the headache away. He sighed, sitting back down heavily, lost in thought. The silence stretched until Buttercup finally spoke, her voice quieter, but layered with what seemed softer. Look, Professor, I get that you don't want us getting hurt. I get that you're scared. But this is all I have. Her words stumbled, not coherent, but honest. I need to be out there. I need to feel like I'm not caged up, like I can breathe. This fighting, being out there, it makes me feel special. It's what I can do. What I'm good at. I don't want to sit around pretending I'm like everyone else when I'm not. Her voice cracked, and she hated how vulnerable it sounded. I don't want to be trapped. I want to fight. I want to help. I want to feel like I'm not useless, like I'm special and... She didn't get to finish, for the professor stood up sharply, his shadow falling over her. This, he gestured broadly, his tone flat and cold, this doesn't make you special, Buttercup. It doesn't make you special at all. The words hit harder than any monster's punch. Buttercup's breath caught. For a moment, she wasn't the defiant powerhouse, or the brash fighter, or even the rebellious daughter. She was just still. Staring at him like she'd just been gutted. The professor sat in his chair, head in his hands, his thoughts swirling in a chaotic loop. The chemical exciters, they must be destabilizing again. I can't get a clean reading. How am I going to fix this before it escalates? Before it attracts H. You don't think I'm special? The words came cracked, barely more than a whisper, but it cut sharper than a scream. The professor's head snapped up, and what he saw almost broke his heart. Buttercup was standing on the couch, but her whole body was trembling. Her fists were clenched tight enough to make knuckles go white and pierce, but her arms shook with a different kind of fight, one she was losing. Tears had welled up in her eyes, defiant yet falling anyway, strkng down her cheeks even as she scowled. Her jaw was tight, like she was trying to lock the sobs in her throat. Buttercup, I didn't mean, the professor stammered, words fumbling. But Buttercup's voice cracked again, raw and burning, you don't think I'm special? You don't think I'm good enough? Huh? Her voice pitched, venomous with pain, but behind it was a young girl who just wanted to scream now. No. The professor stood up abruptly, taking a step toward her. I didn't mean that. I meant your powers don't define you. You are more than that, Buttercup. Enough. Buttercup's voice exploded as a pulse of green energy shot out of her, like a shockwave. The air vibrated, the walls groaned, and the lights flickered violently. The force hit the professor square in the chest, knocking him back into his chair with a harsh thud. He groaned, shielding his eyes as the wave passed. Buttercup floated up, fists clenched, her green aura pulsing angrily. You think I'm a defect, don't you? You think Blossom and Bubbles are the real Powerpuff Girls, and I'm just the mess-up you're stuck with. Her voice was screaming now, and with every word, the air around her seemed to warp and ripple with unstable energy. The professor tried to sit up, raising his hands. Buttercup, listen to me, that's not true. You're my daughter. But Buttercup wasn't listening anymore. The tears were blurring her vision, but her rage didn't need to see. I hate you, she screamed, voice cracking, heart breaking. And in a blur of green, she shot up the stairs, leaving behind only a gust of wind and a father too stunned to react. The house fell eerily quiet, except for the faint hum of a light struggling to stay on. Too far gone was she that she didn't hear her father's remorseful words. "I didn't mean that." Meanwhile, upstairs, Blossom was brushing her hair by the dresser, already in her pink nightgown. Bubbles was humming quietly while fluffing her pillow. But the house had trembled a few moments ago. They both felt it. Something wasn't right. Before Blossom could fully piece it together, the bedroom door slammed open with a violent bang. Buttercup zipped through like a missile, heading straight for the closet. The door slammed shut behind her so hard that the shelves rattled. Both sisters froze, but then, Blossom quickly set her brush down and stormed over to the closet, knocking firmly. "Buttercup? Buttercup, open the door. What's going on? Are you okay? What happened?" There was no response. Just tense silence, but then. "Leave me alone." Buttercup's voice lashed out, rough and muffled. Suddenly, a pulse of green energy burst from under the closet door, hitting Blossom with a gust of air strong enough to make her stumble back. The door shook, but didn't open. Blossom steadied herself, mouth slightly open in shock. "What the?" she whispered, stunned. Bubbles stood from her bed, face pale, her hands fiddling anxiously with the stuffed octopus in her hands. She could feel it in her gut, something was wrong. "Blossom, she's really upset," she said, voice quivering. Her blue eyes shimmered faintly as if her own powers were itching to react. Blossom didn't hesitate. She stepped back up to the door, pressing her palms against it. "Buttercup, talk to me. Please. Don't shut us out like this. We're your sisters. Whatever the professor said, we can figure it out together." But inside the closet, Buttercup was curled up on the floor, knees hugged tight against her chest, her face buried in her arms. Her body shook with every breath, tears leaking out as she muttered in between sobs, "Leave me alone, just leave me alone," she cried in between her words, "I don't want to be here. I just want to be helpful. I just want to feel like I am SP." Whatever she was going to say died in her sobs. Her voice broke entirely at the last part, collapsing into soft, guttural sobs. Blossom could hear it, the raw, unfiltered sadness, and her fist pressed harder against the door. "Buttercup," but Buttercup didn't answer. Bubbles had come closer now, kneeling down by the door, her voice barely a whisper, "Blossom, she's hurting really bad." Was all she could communicate, not really understand this intense wave of sadness she was suddenly feeling. Blossom's face was tense, her leadership instincts clashing with her sisterly heart. She knew Buttercup. She knew pushing too hard would make her retreat further. So instead, Blossom sighed, leaning her forehead gently against the door. "We're not going anywhere, Buttercup. Just so you know, we're right here." Bubbles nodded softly, her blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears, as she sat beside Blossom, resting her chin on her knees, silently keeping vigil. Inside the closet, it wasn't long before Buttercup's sobs quieted, but didn't stop. She soon lay in the darkness, where she replayed the whole previous. The words were echoing in her mind. "That doesn't make you special. Do you know how embarrassing it is? You're reckless. You're impulsive. Blossom. Bubbles. Blossom. Bubbles. That doesn't make you special. Not special. Not special. Not special." Buttercup squeezed her fists over her ears, teeth gritted, her body trembling. It didn't matter how tight she shut her eyes, or how much pressure she applied to block it out, the voices still found her. Every repetition made her chest feel heavier, like something was pressing down on her ribcage, squeezing until there was barely any room left to breathe. For a fleeting second, it felt as though she had been swallowed whole by the very voice she had taken refuge in. And then, everything went black. Buttercup. Her eyes opened slightly, lids heavy as stone. That voice, soft, but distant. It was like hearing someone through a cracked door. She knew it. She knew it too well. "Blossom," she groaned, burying her face further into her folded arms, hoping if she just ignored it, it would go away. Leave me alone. But it didn't go away. Buttercup, where are you? This time, something in her spine jolted. That didn't sound like the younger, bossy, know-it-all sister she saw moments ago. That voice was older, strained, tired, aching. There was a desperation in it that wasn't normal for Blossom. Buttercup's head lifted, slowly, her body felt stiff as if they hadn't moved in hours. Her vision adjusted, not to the closet she thought she was in, but to an endless expanse of swirling black and some lights. She was floating now, weightless, as if the world beneath her had vanished. Her own body shimmered faintly, outlined in a spectrum of green light. What the hell is this? She mumbled, glancing around, heart pounding unevenly in her chest. Another pulse came, and with it, Blossom's voice grew closer. Buttercup, it's me. I'm here. Buttercup's gaze snapped upwards. A flash of pink. There, moving toward her, cutting through the endless darkness like a flare. Blossom. The name tumbled from Buttercup's mouth before she even knew she'd said it. Blossom was close now, her face locked in a determined, yet terrified expression. Buttercup could see the slight tremble in her hands as she reached out. Where are you? Blossom called, her voice trembling with a held-back sob. Please, tell me where you are. And we can. Buttercup tried to move. To float closer. But her limbs felt like lead. She wanted to reach back. She really did. But her body wouldn't listen. It was like she was trapped inside herself, watching from behind glass. Buttercup tried to say something, but was cut off. The air around them vibrated. The void pulsed. And then Buttercup felt it. That laugh. The moment it slithered through the space, every instinct in Buttercup's body screamed run. But there was nowhere to go. Did you really think you could reach her like this? The voice mocked, slithering around her ears. Nah, that's cheating. Buttercup noticed that Blossom's eyes widened in horror as the space around them warped. The green light faltered, and the shadows grew teeth. No, she hissed, fists clenching, heart thundering in her chest. Blossom's figure surged forward, reaching for her, shouting, "Give her back." Buttercup's body jerked. She could feel herself being pulled away, as if an unseen hook had latched onto her chest. Blossom, she screamed, reaching out, fingertips nearly grazing her sister's hand. But the force was too strong. Buttercup. She heard Blossom scream out, before everything exploded into white, and suddenly, Buttercup's eyes snapped open, a sharp gasp ripping from her throat as reality crashed back down like a tidal wave. Air clawed its way into her lungs in short, panicked bursts. Cold, stale, suffocating air of captivity wrapped around her, a mocking reminder of where she really was. She looked around, hearing echoed faintly in the background, their rhythmic drone drilling into her ears. Slowly, she pushed herself up from the cement floor, the familiar presence of the force field shimmering faintly around her like a rage cage. The steel door stood across the room. Nothing had changed. She was still a prisoner. Buttercup stood there for a moment, elbows propped on her knees, rubbing the back of her neck where the ghost of him's claws still lingered, phantom fingers pressing, squeezing, stealing her breath. A shiver crawled down her spine. Her scowl returned by instinct, even as her body trembled beneath it. Geez, it's been a while since I remembered that part of my life, she muttered under her breath, voice dripping with sour amusement. Her mind betrayed her, flashing back to that suffocating argument with the professor, the words still echoing, heavy, bitter. She felt a sting in her eyes, uninvited and unwelcome. TCH. She wiped it away roughly with the back of her hand. No more tears. Not now. Not here. Well, can't change any of it now, she huffed, shaking her head. What a pain. For a moment, her gaze darkened, lips pressed into a thin line. She remembered exactly who was responsible for keeping her in this cage. No more memories. No more dream talk. This was the now. Rolling her shoulders, she stood up, the familiar fire simmering beneath her skin beginning to stir again. Her muscles coiled like springs, the energy in her veins sharpening. She cracked her neck to the side, smirking as she looked toward the barrier imprisoning her. All right. Next round. She declared, cracking her knuckles. Let's see if my little nap gave me my second wind, she muttered, her fists igniting with a soft, pulsing green glow. The energy felt stronger, familiar, and she liked it. She crouched slightly, planting her feet firmly against the cold cement floor as sparks danced along her body. Her lips curled into a confident sneer, but there was something else layered underneath, something she wouldn't voice. Not now. Don't worry, girls, she whispered, her voice low, almost tender. I'm done being locked away. With that, she launched forward, fists blazing, aiming straight at the force field's edge. Green fire roared against the invisible wall as Buttercup's war cry echoed through the sterile chamber, loud, fierce, and defiant. Let's go. Catnip in. Blossom stood alone, her eyes shut tight in focus. A faint pink aura shimmered around her, casting a soft glow against the floor. Slowly, her feet lifted off the ground, legs folding into a meditative lotus position as she began to float steadily in place. It was late in the night, and she was in a dimly lit room she shared with her sisters. Moonlight was filtering through the window, and the room was empty, chosen deliberately for its isolation. No one knew she was here. The silence felt heavier than usual, pressing down on her shoulders like invisible chains. The only sound was the faint hum of her own energy, a quiet whisper of power rising gently around her. She exhaled slowly. Then again. With each breath, she sank deeper into stillness. Then, her eyes snapped open, blazing with bright pink energy, before she closed them again with intention. This time, she let go completely. In an instant, the world around her fell away. Her body remained floating in the quiet room, but her consciousness slipped into the vast void of her mindscape, an ethereal realm of dream space she had long learned to access. It felt like flying underwater through darkness. A shimmering pink projection of herself drifted through the dreamlike abyss. She floated in silence at first, scanning the empty expanse. There was no horizon, no stars, only darkness and the occasional ripple of light trailing through the black. Where are you? Her voice was soft, echoing faintly. Buttercup, she looked around. Buttercup, where are you? She closed her eyes, feeling beyond her thoughts, stretching her senses. Then, there was a flicker of green in the distance. Faint, but real. Her heart leapt. Buttercup, she called, and surged forward, her aura flaring brighter as she flew through the dreamscape. As she drew closer, the green glow became clearer, solidifying into the faint projection of a girl. She was curled in on herself, suspended in the air like a marionette without strings. The light flickered uncertainly around her. Blossom stopped just a few feet away, breath catching. Buttercup, it's me. I'm here. The green figure stirred. Slowly, the girl raised her head, eyes dim and heavy-lidded. Her voice was barely audible, a broken whisper across the void. Be Blossom. A sob rose in Blossom's throat. Where are you? Please, tell me where you are. And we can, her hand stretched forward, trembling. Buttercup's mouth opened to speak, but then, the void trembled. A deep vibration echoed around them, like the world itself had cracked open. The air warped. Light bent. And then came the laughter. Low. Echoing. Familiar. No words are needed to identify the presence. Blossom felt it in every nerve of her being. Him. That voice. That awful, slithering voice. Did you really think you could reach her? He asked. The tone was mockery dipped in malice, stretching in every direction like a snake in the dark. Nah, that's cheating. Blossom's eyes widened in horror. No. No, she shouted, flying toward her sister, hand reaching, heart pounding. Give her back. But the darkness exploded around her, tearing Buttercup away as if reality itself had opened a pit. Blossom screamed. Buttercup. Her hand almost touched hers, so close, but then the void yanked her backward, as if some cruel force was dragging her by the chest through mud and shadow. Everything went white. She gasped awake, and oh, she cried, reaching out in front of her as if her sister had been right there. But the only thing before her was empty space. She was alone. The room was still dark, untouched. Only the sound of her own ragged breathing filled the space. She blinked rapidly, heart pounding, vision still blurred from the rush of energy. Her aura pulsed without command. Then her knees hit the ground. Her hands trembled as she clutched at the place where her dream had ended. The grief, frustration, and anger all surged together. The aura around her exploded outward in a violent wave, flaring pink and wild. The energy ripple cracked through the floor, sending a shimmer of ice in every direction. The air turned frigid in an instant. Frost blossomed along the floor and walls, delicate and deadly. Her breath came out in cold, sharp clouds. She stood slowly, shaking, arms crossing over her chest as if trying to hold herself together. Her voice was nothing more than a whisper. Where are you, Buttercup? Her breath misted in the air, fading as the silence reclaimed her once again. Catnip Hospital. At a hospital near the now-secured training camp, the students of classes A and B were being treated for their injuries. With the threat still unclear, no outside visitors were allowed, much to the outrage of several families who bombarded the school with angry calls, demanding answers and access to their children. The staff did what they could, but for many, isolation made recovery harder. Deep in the quieter wing of the hospital, the morning light filtered in through the half-closed blinds of a small room. Machines softly beeped, monitoring vitals. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung in the air, doing little to comfort the teen lying motionless in the hospital bed. Kirishima's breathing was shallow, each rise and fall of his chest strained by the heavy bandages tightly wrapped around his ribs and torso. His jaw was slightly discolored, a thin brace keeping it in place while it healed. His neck was wrapped in soft support, evidence of the brutal treatment he endured. For lines fed him fluids and painkillers, and a heart monitor ticked steadily beside him. Then, his brow furrowed. Ugh! A quiet groan escaped his throat as he shifted ever so slightly, his eyes fluttering open. At first, everything was a blur. Harsh lights. A dull ache, pounding in his head. For a moment, he didn't realize where he was until the pain returned full force, flaring in his chest and jaw like wildfire. He groaned, barely able to lift his arm. His voice was hoarse, like sandpaper dragging across his throat. He blinked, trying to focus on the ceiling above. He was hurt, but alive. He was just about to muddle through his thoughts, trying to piece together what had happened. Then suddenly, the door clicked open. Mina stepped in, dressed in a hoodie and jeans, the closest to normalcy she could get these days. She held a glass of water in one hand, her usual brightness dulled under the weight of everything they'd been through. Her eyes were tired, shadowed by worry, and her grip on the glass tightened slightly as she walked in. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the red-haired teen blinking slowly at her. "Kiri," she whispered, her voice cracking as her eyes widened. His eyes, still hazy, met hers with a faint glimmer of recognition. His throat burned, but he managed a low, rasping whisper. Mina." The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, but she didn't even flinch. In 2 rushed steps, she was at his bedside and throwing her arms around him, not too concerned about squeezing him too tightly. For the last couple of days, she had been worried sick. Her tears came immediately, muffled into his hospital gown as her fingers gripped the fabric near his shoulders. "You idiot," she sobbed, holding him close. "You scared the hell out of me. I thought you were," her voice broke again, and she buried her face in his chest, trembling. "You were gone, Kiri. You looked so beaten up you didn't wake up." Kirishima grunted softly, the pain from her touch making him wince, but he didn't care. One of his hands, still weak and bandaged, rose slowly and rested gently on her back. His lips trembled with effort, but a small, broken smile tugged at them. "I'm still here," he murmured. They stayed like that for what felt like hours, though it had only been a few minutes. Mina clung to him like a lifeline, her sobs quieter now but still trembling through her body. Kirishima, despite the ache that flared through his ribs and neck, kept one hand resting on her back, rubbing slow, shaky circles. He whispered soft reassurances that barely made it past his raw throat. "I'm okay, I'm here, you don't have to cry." Mina didn't answer right away, she just held him tighter. But then it hit him. A sudden cold sweat washed over him. His chest tightened, not from the physical pain, but from the memory slamming into his mind like a freight train. "Sorry, but you're less than nothing compared to her." "Wait, GAH. He saw the blur of the guy's fists. Felt every punch again, the stomach, the ribs, the sharp crack to his jaw. He heard Shoji's voice, terrified, calling his name, before everything after that had gone black. "Kirishima. Ga." He gasped sharply, his body jerking as if reliving the impact. Mina flinched at the sudden movement, pulling back just enough to see the haunted look in his eyes. "Kiri?" she asked in a panic, her hands hovering over him like she wasn't sure where it hurt. "Hey, what's wrong? Are you okay? Should I get the nurse? Doctor? What's going on?" But Kirishima wasn't looking at her. His eyes stared through her, unfocused, clouded by something darker. He wasn't seeing the hospital room anymore, he was seeing that forest, that fight. Then he muttered it. "Bloss." Mina froze. What? He blinked, his eyes slowly returning to the present. He winced and pushed through the rasp in his throat. "B Blossom," this time more clearly, "where is she? Is she okay?" Mina's entire expression shifted, from confusion to a cold, tight-lipped stare. Her eyes didn't widen. They narrowed. Her grip on the edge of the bed tightened. "Seriously, Kirishima," she said, her voice low, almost disbelieving. Kirishima blinked at her, confusion evident in his eyes, not realizing the sudden change in her demeanor. She just looked at him like she didn't know if she wanted to cry again or yell. The warmth in her eyes was gone, replaced with a look that held something bitter, hurt, maybe. Or betrayal. Before he could question, the door to the room suddenly opened as Kaminari peeked his head in. "Hey, I heard something break." "Did whoa," he gasped, eyes wide. "Yo. He's awake. Kirishima's awake." Both Mina and Kirishima turned as the door burst open, as some of his classmates flooded in behind Kaminari. "Kirishima." Siro called out, rushing toward him with a shaky, relieved grin. "Dude, we were so worried. We didn't know when you were gonna wake up," Shoji said, his usually calm tone full of visible relief. "Kirishima." Toru nearly threw herself at him, stopping just short when she saw the bandages wrapped tightly around his ribs. "Oh my God, you scared us so bad." "It is good to see you escape the darkness, my friend," Tokoyami said, his usual monotone carrying an unmistakable undertone of concern. Kirishima blinked, overwhelmed as his classmates clustered around him, Kaminari, Mina, Shoji, Toru, even Ida, standing stiffly near the doorway, arms crossed, but clearly tense. There was a look of unmistakable worry behind his glasses. His eyes shifted slowly, scanning the faces crowding his hospital room. There were faces, showing signs of relief, emotional, but they were starting to fade, muffled like they were coming from the other end of a tunnel. His gaze passed over each of his classmates, not seeing as certain someone. Bakugou, Kirishima's smile quickly fell the moment his mind suddenly remembered the events before he passed out. He felt his heart twist inside, the guilt of being unable to reach him in time, and the helplessness of knowing that he couldn't do anything only for himself to not be there. Jiru, being the only one capable of hearing that, spoke up. "Yo, Kirishima, what's wrong?" Silence now hung in the air until it was finally broken. "Where is she?" he whispered again, this time louder, more broken. His voice cracked and trembled, the word barely escaping his dry throat. What happened? Earlier, the early morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the hospital room, casting long golden streaks across the floor. The world outside moved on, unaware of the quiet grief and tension brewing inside the room. In the room, Kota lay asleep in the bed, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, bandages wrapped tightly around parts of his torso and head. An foreline connected to his arm, giving him a bag of fluids and some pain medications. Bubbles sat silently by his bedside, her fingers resting on the edge of the blanket. Her hair was let down from their usual pigtails, cascading down below her shoulders, wearing an oversized pastel yellow hoodie that drooped over her frame, and her bare legs dangled just above the tiled floor. Her normally bright eyes were clouded with worry, fixed not on Kota, but on the window, like she hoped something, anything, would appear and give them a sign. The door creaked open behind her, and Blossom stepped in, quietly closing it behind her. Her hair was braided and tied into a low ponytail, and she was wearing a long-sleeve white and blush-pink Henley top and high-waisted, soft-knit lounge pants. Her expression was tight, her eyes shadowed with slight exhaustion, and she probably had not gotten a lick of sleep. "Hey," Blossom looked over her sister, "how is he, today?" she casually asked, stepping forward. "He's doing better, woke up a little while ago," she let out a quiet yawn. Blossom didn't really reply to that, only noticed Bubbles' tired state, watching over Kota. Bubbles turned, hopeful. "Did you find her?" she asked quickly, standing up, her voice filled with urgency. Blossom shook her head, a heavy sigh escaping her lips. "Even with projecting my subconscious self out, I can't get very far, to see anything that might give us a clue. On top of that, I don't know where else to go." She ran a hand through her bangs and moved toward the chair beside Bubbles. Bubbles looked down, disappointment etched across her face. "It's been days. Every hour that passes and we still don't know where she is." "I know," Blossom said gently, sitting beside her. "But diving in blindly would only make things worse. Why can't we do more?" Bubbles' voice cracked as she looked up, her eyes glassy. "We're supposed to be heroes and we're just sitting here while Buttercup is still being held captive." "Because we don't have clearance," Blossom said quietly, not wanting to wake up Kota. "We can't just go out there. We don't have a license, and breaking the law could cause trouble." "I don't care." Bubbles interrupted, her voice sharp with emotion. She stomped her foot on the ground, and the room trembled slightly. "Him has Buttercup, and we're stuck here doing nothing while he, her voice faltered as tears welled up in her eyes, "while he does what if he's hurting her," she whispered, breaking down in a soft sob. Blossom's heart broke as she quickly stepped forward, pulling Bubbles into a tight embrace. It had only been a couple of days since the whole ambush at the training camp, but the girls were still shaken by it, more so Bubbles, as she kept blaming herself for not trying to save Buttercup in time, but Blossom told her over and over again that she was not at fault, it was a crazy, and unforeseen situation. But Blossom knew she herself was at fault, for she was the leader and older sister. She just wished she had done things differently. Maybe if I had gotten to them in time, maybe, she just held her sister as she cried, her own worries sinking into the background for a moment as she focused on comforting Bubbles. The weight of the situation was crushing, but Blossom knew she had to stay strong for both of them. "It's all my fault," Bubbles cried softly in her sister's arms, her words muffled against Blossom's shoulder. If I had gotten to her faster to have protected her with my bubble field, maybe she would still be here." Blossom squeezed her tighter, gently stroking her hair. "Bubbles, it's not your fault," she said firmly, though the voice in the back of her head whispered otherwise. "Yeah, it's your fault. You just had to play catch your boyfriend, didn't you?" Blossom shook the stray thought away, trying to push it out of her mind. Look, I know it's frustrating. I know it's hard. But we have to tread carefully. We can't stir up trouble with everything that's happening. We need to be smart about this. Bubbles sniffled and wiped her tears away, nodding slowly. I know we can't. 'Cause trouble. It's so frustrating, you know. Blossom nodded, sitting down on the bed beside her. There was a quiet pause before Bubbles spoke again, her voice small but full of concern. Do you think Buttercup and Bakugou are okay? She asked, her eyes searching Blossom's face. Blossom paused, thinking carefully. I can't say anything about Bakugou, but Buttercup is tough. She'll be fine, she said, offering a small smile. Honestly, I'm more worried about the yahoos who took her. She tried to lighten the mood, but it didn't take long for the seriousness of the situation to return. Bubbles gave a small laugh at the joke, but it quickly faded. Her face grew serious. Him isn't alone. And now we know he might have other villains from Townsville helping him. Blossom sighed, gazing out the window. Yeah, you're right. Bubbles then asked, do you think they captured Buttercup because they know about Chemical X? Do you think him told them everything? Blossom stood up, walking across the room, her mind racing with the possibilities. It's likely that he got whoever's working for him's attention, she said slowly. But the guy I faced, he was bad, but it felt like he didn't know him that well. I don't think him told them everything. Bubbles frowned in confusion. Are you sure? Why not? Blossom stopped walking, her eyes narrowing as she thought. Him likes to play games, she said thoughtfully, and he never shows his hand until he knows he has the upper hand. Memories of their previous battles came running in. He never lets his pawns know all the moves he's planning. Bubbles nodded in understanding. And he has villains from this world, playing whatever games he has in store, not knowing the real outcome. Yeah, Blossom nodded grimly. He does. Bubbles sat back down, her gaze drifting toward Koda's sleeping form. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was oddly grounding, even as everything else felt like it was spiraling. Her fingers curled around the blanket again, gripping it a little tighter. Bubbles' eyes stayed fixed on Koda, her voice barely above a whisper. Blossom, do you think this whole attack is our fault? Blossom's head snapped around, her eyes narrowing. What do you mean? Bubbles hesitated, her lip trembling before she finally spoke. Would the villains even be here if it wasn't for us? Blossom's expression tightened. Bubbles, you can't really think that. Why not? Bubbles' voice cracked, louder now. We had him follow us into this world. We opened the door. We brought all of it with us. That's not fair, Blossom said sharply, her tone still level, but the edge was unmistakable. We never intended to be here, Bubbles. And I am sure, him didn't either, as well. We didn't bring him. He followed us. There's a difference. Bubbles stood, frustration twisting her features. Maybe, but if we hadn't come here, if we had stayed in Townsville, he wouldn't have either. This world wouldn't be falling apart because of our enemies. We didn't choose to come here, Bubbles. And we didn't bring them here. Blossom shot back, her voice rising despite her best efforts. You think this is what we wanted? You think I wanted Buttercup taken? I didn't say that. Bubbles shouted, then immediately winced, her voice softening again. I didn't say that. I don't know anymore, Blossom. Maybe all we do is bring trouble everywhere we go. Blossom clenched her fists, her aura pulsing faintly, barely visible, but the air in the room seemed heavier, colder. Her breath came slightly faster, but she kept her stance rigid. Her voice, though cool, vibrated with restrained emotion. This is ridiculous, Bubbles. Just then, Koda stirred in the hospital bed, groaning softly as his eyes fluttered open. What's happening? He asked groggily, blinking up at the tense room. Blossom didn't move, but it was Bubbles who turned to the bed. "It's nothing," she said briskly, eyes still locked with Blossom. "Go back to sleep." Just then, Blossom walked towards the door. Bubbles looked like she might cry again, her voice catching. "Blossom, where are you going?" Reaching the door, Blossom spoke over her shoulder, to get some air, before closing it behind her, not waiting for a response. The door shut harder than she intended behind her, but the atmosphere she left behind still crackled with unresolved tension. The hallway was bright and sterile, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing quietly above. Blossom walked briskly at first, then slowed, her shoes echoing against the floor. Her fists relaxed, then tensed again. Her thoughts weren't quiet, not really her thoughts, but that voice. The one that sounded like her but didn't feel like her. Cold. Calculating. "You know she's not wrong. You should have predicted this. You should have stopped him before he ever got here." She closed her eyes, exhaling through her nose. Her aura shimmered faintly again, pink energy flaring subtly at her temples, dissipating just as quickly. She fought it down. "You're supposed to be the leader. What kind of leader lets her sister get taken?" Her shoulders tensed. "You let your feelings get in the way. Again. Him knows how to exploit that. He always has. Stop." She internally screamed, halting her movement. Standing by a window, she suddenly opened her eyes and took another steadying breath. This wasn't the time to crack. She had to stay grounded, for Buttercup, for Bubbles, for herself. She moved slowly down the corridor, letting the rhythm of her steps calm her, letting the silence cradle her frayed thoughts. "What am I going to do?" she questioned herself, feeling the tightness of guilt, knowing at her heart, "We have to find where they are holding Bakugou and Buttercup," before a voice brought her out of her thoughts. "Hey, Blossom." She quickly turned around to see Uraraka and Izuku, bandaged, walking up to her, his face holding up a smile, but she knew it didn't reach. "Hey, Blossom," she greeted, wearing a pink hoodie over a white t-shirt and jeans. But you could see the wrappings showing on her collarbone. "Hello, Izuku, Uraraka," she looked over his injuries, feeling bad. "I hope you're all feeling better." Yeah, Izuku muttered, more so to himself. He looked down at his wrappings, thankful. Of course, that recovery girl took the time to heal him, but wished it were another certain healer to do it. He couldn't forget the screams that night, the pain-filled screams before he saw her body grow limp and then carried off into the dark warp portal, unable to do anything to stop it. Buttercup. He looked back up, noticing Blossom's own brewing turmoil. "Oh, Blossom, we were on our way to go and see Kirishima." He cleared his throat a bit. "Aoyama texted in the group chat that he was awake, so we decided to go over." Blossom nodded, "I see." "Yeah," Uraraka stepped in, "we just wanted to make sure he is okay and seeing that you are here." Izuku cut in. "Do you want to go with us?" he asked cautiously. Blossom felt a sudden tightness in her chest. The idea of seeing her classmates, Kirishima, even, brought a cold unease she couldn't shake. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face them yet, especially with the memory of everything that had happened at the forest training camp still so fresh in her mind. Blossom stammered, trying to find the words, but they stuck in her throat. "I'm not sure it's a good idea." Izuku looked at her with his usual earnestness, his brow furrowed with concern. "I think it might help. I'm sure Kirishima has been asking about everyone. He might be worried about all of us. About you, too. Especially knowing about he trailed off, feeling the fresh wounds of his failure." Uraraka, who had been standing a little too close to Izuku without realizing it, nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, and besides, it might be nice for you to see everyone. Things have been kinda tense lately, but I think it'd help." Blossom opened her mouth to protest again, but before she could, her own hesitancy collided with the weight of the pressure in her chest. "I should say no. I should just walk away." But the words wouldn't come. She glanced at Izuku and Uraraka, their hopeful faces waiting for her response. In the end, against every instinct screaming at her to turn and leave, she nodded, offering a nervous smile. "Sure," she said, her voice a little softer than she'd intended. "Let's go." And just like that, the decision was made. The three of them turned, walking in silence toward Kirishima's room. The corridor was quiet, save for the sound of their footsteps echoing off the sterile white walls. With each step, the knot in Blossom's stomach tightened. She didn't know if she was ready for this. Was anyone? The walk wasn't long, but it felt like an eternity. Just as they rounded a corner, the muffled sound of raised voices reached their ears. Uraraka, pausing for a moment, tilted her head. "What's that?" Izuku's expression shifted to one of concern. "That's coming from Kirishima's room." Without thinking, he moved toward the door, his hand reaching for the knob. Blossom followed, her steps faltering for just a second. There was a shift in the air tension, like a storm brewing on the horizon. As Izuku pushed the door open, the voices grew louder, sharper. "Telling you, I can't just sit around." Kirishima's voice rang out, a fire in it that was both desperate and resolute. "This isn't about waiting. We have to act now. And I'm telling you, you're being reckless," Ida argued, his voice sharp with frustration. He stood near the foot of the bed, arms rigid at his sides. "We are students. Some of us are injured. You especially need to rest. This is a matter for the pro heroes. They're the ones with the experience to handle this. We'll only make things worse." Kirishima's words echoed through the room, his anger palpable. "And what are we supposed to do, huh? Wait for them to come back? Wait for more of us to get taken? You heard what happened to him. They're out there, and we're just sitting around like nothing." "Kirishima, stop." Ida snapped. "We can't just sit here like cowards." Zero snapped. "They'd do it for us. You know they would." "None of us are cowards," Jiraiya bit back, "but you're acting like breaking rules is going to magically fix this." The tension in the room was thick, the arguments escalating as others began to voice their own opinions. Some of them, like Mina and Kaminari, were supporting Kirishima's sentiment, demanding action. Others, like Tokoyami and Tsu, were more cautious, siding with Ida's call for patience and the reliance on professional help. The rest, like Aoyama, Shoji, and Toru, were quiet but visibly uncomfortable with the situation at hand. It was a mess. And then, with a quiet but forceful voice, Izuku stepped into the room. "What's going on here?" His words cut through the chaos like a knife. His tone wasn't sharp, but there was something about it that made the arguing stop in an instant. Silence fell. Every head in the room turned toward the doorway, where Izuku, Uraraka, and Blossom stood. For a moment, no one moved. The room went quiet. Some of their classmates, like Kaminari and Jiraiya, were looking at Blossom with wary eyes. Others, like Mina and Siro, had hard, accusatory stares fixed on her. The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Blossom did her best to keep her expression neutral, but it felt like the temperature in the room had dropped several degrees. Every second that passed seemed to pull the air out of her lungs. Uraraka, who had been hovering just behind Izuku, now stepped in, her voice soft but firm. "Yeah, what's all this about? Why are you guys fighting?" There was a long pause. Then, Tsu, who had been leaning near the window, spoke up in her usual quiet, matter-of-fact tone. "They're arguing," she said, with a croak. "About going after Bakugou and Buttercup." Blossom's heart skipped a beat, her eyes widened in shock, and her breath caught in her throat. Uraraka gasped. "What? That's dangerous. We can't. We don't even have our licenses yet. We're not allowed to use our quirks like that, not without breaking the law." Her words struck the room like a hammer, reigniting the simmering conflict. "And what if the pro-heroes don't get there in time?" Mina shot back, voice cracking. What if they're too late? We're just supposed to wait. Yes. Ida replied, stern and absolute. That is exactly what we're supposed to do. The pro-heroes are handling this. It is not our place. You don't get it. Kirishima barked, and though his voice strained from the effort, it silenced the room again. He looked down at his clenched fists, feeling frustrated at himself for not doing anything. He could still remember the way he was taken down so easily, and couldn't put up much of a fight. I wasn't there to save him, he muttered, feeling the feeling of defeat wash over him. Everyone in the room was brought to silence again. Izuku stood silently, his hands clenched at his sides. He could see the crushed look in Kirishima's eyes, raw, helpless, defeated. That look mirrored his own from just nights before. The memory of the forest echoed in his mind like a haunting melody, of Buttercup's screams, of Bakugou's struggle, of the warped shadows pulling them away into the darkness. He'd been too weak again. He opened his mouth, trying to say something, anything, but Ida's firm voice cut through the tension. I understand how you must feel, Kirishima, Ida said, his expression grim. But we cannot do anything reckless. We have laws for a reason. His tone hardened, eyes locking onto the others. If you go rushing into this without thinking, it will be just like Hosu all over again. And I won't stand by and allow that. Silence returned. Uncomfortable. Heavy. Kirishima's fingers trembled against the bed covers, his jaw clenched as frustration simmered beneath the surface. He cast a glance toward Blossom, who stood quietly near the door, gaze low, unreadable. Blossom, he said, hesitating. What's on your mind? Don't you want to go and save Bakugou and your sister? She looked up slowly, startled. But before she could form words, Mina exploded. Are we really not gonna talk about it? The room froze. Mina's voice cracked with emotion as she pushed off the wall. Are we really just gonna keep pretending like we don't see it? That she's not part of this somehow? She pointed at Blossom. Kirishima's eyes widened in disbelief. Mina, how could you? No, it is now, Kiri, she snapped, voice rising. I can't stand here and pretend like I'm not thinking it. Like we're not thinking it. Izuku's brows furrowed, confused and stunned. Blossom's eyes widened, her lips parting slightly in disbelief. What are you saying? She asked quietly, voice uncertain. Mina's hands trembled. You and your sister show up here, suspiciously powerful. You don't explain where you're from. Then the villains come, knowing exactly where the training camp is, and they're so focused on you too. Tsu croaked out, we never thought that, not liking this situation being brought up again. Mina turned on her. Yeah, right. Maybe not you, Tsu. But I know some of you are thinking it. Her eyes scanned the room. Aoyama shook his head, muttering, Jamais. El est innocent. Shoji turned away in disapproval. Tokoyami and Toru turned away, not wanting to say anything. But others remained silent. Siro's gaze stayed on the situation. Kaminari looked visibly uncomfortable. Ida didn't speak. Even Uraraka bit her lip, eyes cast downward. But it was clear on their faces that they weren't denying the claims. Izuku's chest tightened. You think they had something to do with it? His voice was filled with disbelief. Blossom's face stayed still, emotionless, but inside, she was reeling. Betrayal twisted deep in her chest. Kirishima's face twisted in pain. Guys, seriously? Are you hearing yourselves right now? But Mina wasn't finished. Kirishima, you were badly hurt. And why? She gestured at his wrapped side. Because of her. Because you went after them, and she's standing there like she's done nothing. Mina, stop. Kirishima urged, pushing himself to sit up straighter, wincing. No. I'm not done. Mina strode away from the bed, pointing accusingly at Blossom. All this happened because you and your sister showed up out of nowhere. And now Bakugou, he's gone. Don't pretend like it's not weird. You're hiding something, and I'm done acting like you're not. Blossom didn't move. Her bangs shadowed her eyes, her lips pressed into a firm line. Yo, Mina, chill, Jiru tried weakly, but the tension was suffocating. I'm leaving, Blossom muttered, her voice hollow. She stepped toward the door, hand hovering over the knob. Mina crossed her arms. Are you leaving because it's true? Because you know you're at fault? Why did you even come here in the first place? Mina. Izuku shouted. But the words were out. And the damage was done. Blossom stood frozen, hand still near the doorknob. Kirishima tried to push himself forward, with pain in his face. Mina, suddenly, a pink aura flared across the room like lightning. What the? Gasps erupted as Mina was lifted into the air, yelping in fear as the aura bound her limbs, holding her aloft. And suddenly, the temperature dropped. Tsu, unfortunately, was the first to feel it harshly, as she stammered, the air so cold, before her knees gave out. Shoji caught her instinctively, wrapping her up in his arms for warmth. Everyone stared, eyes wide, as the room was bathed in a pale, icy sheen. Frost crept along the floor, spreading from Blossom's feet like cracking glass. Her braid had come undone, red-orange hair floating weightlessly around her shoulders, in a familiar, scary sign of her power. Her eyes glowed with a fierce, electric pink, tinged with ghostly blue. The scowl she wore twisted her soft features into something colder, sharper. Blossom's voice echoed low, distorted by the sheer energy radiating from her. What did you just say to me? Everyone stared in stunned silence. Ida was the first to act. Blossom. Cease this at once. You're using your quirk against another stew. He rushed forward, but before he could get close, a burst of pink energy lashed out and pinned him against the far wall with a crash. He groaned, trapped. Ida. Uraraka screamed, wanting to rush over to him, what the heck, but she, too, was caught mid-step, frozen in place by the aura, her body held tightly to the ground. Panic erupted as many others felt the effects. Tokoyami struggled against the invisible force pinning him. I can't move. Shiro grunted beside him. My arms. What is this? The room had grown frigid. Frost snaked its way across the floors, crawling up walls like vines. The windows were misted over, breath becoming visible in the cold air. Books, trays, and scattered supplies lifted into the air, trembling with unseen pressure, swaying in place as if the atmosphere itself had been displaced. Izuku strained, his muscles trembling as he tried to take a single step forward. Blossom, please. Stop this. This isn't you. But Blossom didn't seem to hear him. Or if she did, she didn't care. Her feet no longer touched the floor. Her hair, once neatly braided, now floated around her face like tendrils of wildfire. Her eyes glowed, a dangerous blend of vibrant pink and blue, radiating fury that pulsed in waves. The temperature dropped further as she floated closer to Mina. Then the voices returned, quiet at first, but growing louder in her mind. Do it. She deserves it. Teach her what happens when people speak without knowing. Let her remember what it feels like to be powerless. Make her regret it. She called you a traitor. She poisoned the minds of your friends. They were all thinking it anyway. Make her pay. Blossom clenched her fists, shaking. Her breathing became ragged, uneven. More items began to rise, the pillows, chairs, even medical tools, rattling violently in the air. Mina stared back at her, terror widening her eyes. She didn't speak, she couldn't. The fury in Blossom's expression was like staring into a storm. You don't know anything about me or my sisters, Blossom said, her voice sharp and trembling, but layered, echoing slightly with something darker beneath. Absolutely nothing. The objects in the room pulsed at her words, floating higher, heavier. Her powers stirred the walls, her aura warping the air around her. The bedposts groaned. Somewhere behind her, the glass in a cabinet cracked. Kirishima strained, gritting his teeth, trying to push through the aura binding him, and the cold seemingly causing sluggishness. Blossom. Please, this isn't the way. You're better than this. Don't do it. But his voice barely broke through the haze that was going through her mind. Her face was a mere feet away from Mina as she said, "You want to know what we are," and suddenly, to Mina's utter horror, tiny glowing cracks spread out from across Blossom's face. "Then let me show exactly who." "Blossom, stop." The voice broke through the storm. Blossom's body froze midair. Her eyes widened slightly, her lips parted as her breath hitched, as a soft blue light washed over her, gentle, calm. A warmth that cooled the pressure in the room. Her aura flickered, the oppressive force dimming beneath the blue glow overtaking her. Everyone managed to turn slowly at what happened, and at the doorway stood Bubbles. Her hair shimmered faintly, her eyes glowing a soft cerulean blue. Her hands were outstretched, pulsing with her own power, her aura wrapping around her sister like a blanket. She wasn't alone. Behind her, a nurse stood cautiously, one gloved hand still steaming from forcing the door open. Most likely quirk use. "Please," Bubbles said softly, her voice trembling. "Don't do this. Come back to me." Blossom trembled as her own aura faltered. The tiny cracks that marred her face were gone. Her feet slowly descended to the floor. The floating objects dropped harmlessly to the ground with scattered thuds. The frost receded from the walls, retreating like a tide. Mina dropped to the floor with a painful thump, crying out softly as she landed on her side, clutching her arm. She was shaken, pale, but alive. Izuku let out a choked gasp as he finally moved forward, breath heavy, still processing everything. Around the room, others groaned, regaining control of their limbs, but not their voices. Blossom stood there, frozen. Her eyes darted across the room, at the damage she'd caused, the shattered trust reflected in the stares of her classmates. She looked at Mina, who avoided her gaze, still trembling. At Uraraka, who trembled. Ida, who sat against the wall, nursing a bruise, but silent. Finally, her eyes met Kirishima's. And she saw it, buried beneath the pain, beneath the disbelief, fear. The same fear she had seen once long ago. The kind that said, "You're a monster." She whispered, barely audible, "Sorry." Tears fell fast, strkng down her cheeks. Her knees buckled, but she turned sharply and ran through the open doorway, past Bubbles, without a single look back. "Blossom." Bubbles called out, chasing after her. "Wait please." But she was already gone. The hallway swallowed her up, her footsteps fading with every second. Bubbles stood in the doorway, torn between her sister and the stunned room. She turned slowly, her own power fading. Her eyes scanned the damage, the frost-covered floor, the overturned furniture, the shocked faces. No one said a word. Izuku stood in silence, still wide-eyed. Uraraka looked away, her hands shaking at her sides. Kirishima sat back, eyes lowered in guilt. Some classmates turned away. Some looked ashamed. Others simply looked lost. Bubbles looked down, picking up her sister's forgotten ribbon, and took off, leaving the others behind. Then came the voice of one of the staff, rushed and frantic. "What the hell happened in here? Is everyone alright?" But it fell on deaf ears. No one answered. Because all anyone could do was stare at the empty space where Blossom had stood, and where something had changed forever. The stairwell. Blossom didn't fly. She could have, should have, but right now, she didn't trust herself with that kind of freedom. Her boots echoed softly as she half stumbled, half ran through the quiet, sterile stairwell of the hospital, the flickering fluorescent lights above humming with a sickly rhythm. Her limbs felt too heavy, her breaths too sharp, and her thoughts too loud. The stares of her classmates, Mina's terrified face, Ida pinned to the wall, Uraraka's trembling voice, it all blurred into one crushing weight on her chest. Frost had crept across the floor back there, spreading from her like a curse, born of a rage she barely understood. She collapsed in a narrow corner beside the emergency exit, the cold concrete at her back anchoring her in the present. Her knees curled tightly to her chest, fists clenched in the folds of her skirt, her breath coming in hitched, broken sobs, loud and raw, echoing off the walls like accusations. Her hair, usually pristine, hung loose and tangled, half fallen from its ribbon, clinging to tear-streaked cheeks. She bit her knuckle, trying to silence the sound spilling from her, but it was no use. She couldn't hold it in anymore. The guilt, the fear, the memory, it was too much. And so, she cried. Not the quiet, composed tears of a leader, but the kind that shook her shoulders and shattered her composure completely. What have I done? Suddenly remembering that night. It had been cold, bitterly cold. Not because of the weather, but because of the situation at hand, she hovered above the burning forest, suspended in a storm of her own power. Snowflakes fell thick and silent around her, summoned instinctively, mixing with flickers of pink light as they choked out the flames licking at the trees below her. The sky was a canvas of smoke and embers, as the other areas were still engulfed in it. She still remembered having Kirishima in her arms, limp and bleeding, his body bruised and broken from wounds that should never have happened. A trickle of blood streaked down his face, mouth. He had tried to help her. Tried to fight. And he had nearly died for it. She remembered whispering his name over and over, her voice calm and level. You're okay. You're okay. Please be okay. She flew towards the inn, leaving behind her sister. She rushed but remembered to be careful, still gripping him tight, terrified she might drop him or jostle him the wrong way. When she stepped in front of the people around, in view, her classmates had rushed toward her, voices rising, faces pale with fear and confusion. The looks in their eyes made her stomach twist, disbelief, horror, defeat. Mr. Aizawa's face was stone, unreadable but grim. The police were already there, sirens flashing in the distance. Firefighters charged into what was left of the blaze behind her, barking orders into radios. Someone tried to speak to her, to take Kirishima from her arms, and Blossom, automatically, did so, but barely heard them. She walked away, trying to center herself and make sense of the mess around. Her thoughts weren't with the others or the aftermath. Her mind was trapped in one desperate loop, find them. Get Buttercup and Bakugou back. She wasn't there. She should have been there. She was the leader, she was supposed to protect them. Her body trembled as she buried her face in her hands, shaking. I almost hurt them. I lost control. Again. She clenched her teeth, a fresh wave of tears stinging her eyes. Leader. The word felt like a mockery. And now, sitting on the stairwell, she felt that same bitterness creeping up again. You were supposed to protect them. You're the leader. The big sister. You failed. The sound of approaching footsteps snapped her out of the memory. She stiffened, wiping her face quickly, dreading the idea of someone from the hospital staff having followed her. But it wasn't any of the hospital staff. Blossom. She froze, knowing whose voice it was. But didn't answer. Couldn't. Her throat closed around the sob she had just barely managed to contain. But Bubbles found her anyway, rounding the corner with a look of deep worry and guilt. Seeing that only broke Blossom further. She turned her head away, ashamed. Blossom, Bubbles said again, softer now. Please, it's okay, we can. It's not okay, Bubbles. Blossom shouted, her voice cracking mid-sentence. It's not, her breath hitched, the sobs rising again. She choked on her own sob, her voice catching, breaking. I almost hurt them. I scared them. They were right to be scared of me. Bubbles didn't flinch. If anything, her expression softened, her eyes wide with sympathy. She walked closer, slow and careful, like approaching a wounded animal. And then, she knelt. No force fields. No light shows. No powers. Just arms, warm, steady, human, wrapping around her big sister's shaking form. Blossom didn't resist. Couldn't. The second Bubbles touched her, she broke again, all composure lost as her sobs racked her body. Her arms wrapped around Bubbles like a lifeline, burying her face into her sister's shoulder as the walls she built shattered all over again. For a while, they said nothing. The stairwell, far from any wandering staff or curious eyes, became their little sanctuary. In this quiet corner, they weren't leaders or heroes or symbols of hope. They were just girls. Girls who needed each other. Eventually, as Blossom's breathing began to steady, Bubbles pulled back slightly, her hands still gently resting on Blossom's arms. Her face was wet too, but her voice was steady. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Blossom blinked at her, confusion cutting through the haze. "What? Why are you sorry?" But Bubbles shook her head. "Please. Just listen." Blossom, still trembling, nodded. "When Buttercup was taken we were both devastated, scared. But you," her voice trembled, "you took it harder. You blamed yourself. You were trying to hold it together, trying to calm me down, like you always do for us. Like a good big sister." She hesitated, guilt heavy in her voice. "And I didn't help. I guess I blamed you. I let my fear turn into anger, and I dumped that on you. I made it worse." She looked down, ashamed. "I let my sadness twist everything. I lashed out. And you already blame yourself more than anyone ever could. I should have seen that. I should have protected you. Like a sister should." Blossom's lips parted, eyes glistening. "Bubbles." "No, let me finish," Bubbles said firmly, the rare edge in her voice surprising even herself. "Blossom, you're the best of us at keeping a cool head. You always have been. But sometimes you take on too much. You try to carry it all because you're the leader. But you're also our sister. And if Buttercup were here, she'd tell you to stop getting stuck in your own egg head." Blossom let out a quiet chuckle, recognizing the truth in those words. "I could feel how bad you were feeling," Bubbles continued, her voice soft and trembling. "And I shouldn't have added to it. We're all stressed. We're all scared. But right now, all we have is each other. And we need to be more open, more honest. We can't let this break us. Okay?" Her voice cracked, and she blinked back tears, struggling to hold it together. Without a word, Blossom reached out and pulled her sister into a proper hug, tight, warm, and long overdue. "I'm sorry too," Blossom murmured. "And I'm sorry you had to see me like that." They stayed like that for a while, locked in silence and warmth, before slowly pulling away. But as the quiet settled, Blossom's voice returned, hesitant. "But what am I supposed to do about the incident?" Before she could spiral again, Bubbles gently pressed a finger to her lips. "We'll handle it later," she said firmly. Bubbles sniffled and gave a half-laugh through her tears. "So, just shut up and give yourself some time to actually rest. Okay?" Blossom smiled, the weight on her chest a little lighter. "Fine," she said quietly, and held on a little longer. They stayed like that for a while, locked in silence and warmth, before slowly pulling away. Without a word, they got to their feet and began the walk back through the quiet hospital corridors. It was afternoon now, the golden light of the sun filtered in through the tall windows, casting long beams across the floor as they walked side by side. Blossom ran a hand through her tousled, ribbonless hair and sighed. "Great. I'm gonna have to get a new hair ribbon." Bubbles giggled softly. Blossom turned to look at her, raising a brow. What? Still smiling, Bubbles reached into her pocket and held something out. I already grabbed it for you when you left it behind, she said simply. Blossom blinked, surprised. But then a smile tugged at the corners of her lips as she took back her red ribbon from her sister's hand. Thanks, Bubbles, she said, giving her a side hug. She took a moment to pull her hair back into a ponytail, the familiar feeling of the ribbon tying everything back into place settling something deep within her. As they continued walking, Bubbles glanced sideways. So what are we going to do about Buttercup? Blossom hummed in thought, her gaze distant for a moment. She was about to speak when someone turned the corner ahead of them, and they stopped when they saw who it was. Todoroki, they said in unison. The moment their eyes met, the mood shifted. Both girls instinctively braced themselves, subtle tension creeping into their shoulders. Blossom stepped slightly ahead of Bubbles. Bubbles didn't say anything, but her hands flexed at her sides. Todoroki slowed his pace, raising his hands slightly in peace. I'm not here to cause trouble, he said calmly, voice even, yet earnest. Bubbles narrowed her eyes but said nothing. Blossom studied him for a second, then gave a small nod. All right, she said. What is it? Todoroki didn't waste time. Follow me. I believe I have something of interest to both of you. The sisters exchanged looks, cautious, uncertain, but something in Todoroki's voice and posture convinced them. Without another word, they followed. The walk led them to one of the quieter hospital wings. Todoroki paused outside a door, knocked gently, and pushed it open. Inside, Momo sat upright in her hospital bed, a clean bandage wrapped around her head. She was dressed in her usual clothes. Sitting nearby was izukumidoriya, his arms resting on the chair's frame, eyes tired but alert. The moment Blossom and Bubbles stepped in, their expressions softened with worry. Momo. Bubbles rushed over, concern etched into her face. Are you okay? Blossom was just behind her, scanning their friend with gentle eyes. We heard what happened. We're so sorry. Momo smiled warmly, seeing her friends there. I'm okay, she said reassuringly. It's just an injury from the fight with the Nomu. I'm just glad it wasn't too serious. Blossom placed a hand on her arm. Still, we're glad you're all right. Todoroki moved to Momo's side, standing a bit closer than necessary. A quiet gesture of support. She gave him a grateful glance, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Then Momo's face grew serious. I have something to talk to you two about, she said. Her eyes flicked toward Izuku, then back to the sisters. Actually, we all do. The warmth in the room shifted to focus. Blossom and Bubbles stood straight now, exchanging a quick glance before nodding. Go ahead, Blossom said. Momo took a breath, her expression calm but serious. We have a way to find Bakugou and Buttercup. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 16. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author ChiWriters on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.